Okay, it's time for Fact or Fiction number 20. And my name is Phil, and you're listening to Lib. Well, Fact or Fiction 20. I'm excited about this. I love Fact or Fiction episodes. They're my favorite ones. Are they my absolute favorite? Very possibly. It's one of those situations where I have to flip a coin to decide which one would be absolute favorite, but on the contenders list, for sure, Fact or Fiction is right up there with them. There's no doubt about that. Now, as far as Fact or Fiction goes, this episode, Fact or Fiction number 20, was supposed to be released on January 10th, 2026. However, I made the snap decision and went with What Are We Doing number 7, because there was something that was going on that I think that I needed to cover right then versus Fact or Fiction, which really doesn't need a whole lot of maintenance to it. It is what it is. Doesn't require a lot of help. Whereas an active situation, a more active situation with What Are We Doing, just seemed to be more appropriate at the time. So here I am on January 28th, 2026, recording this episode, which will be released on January 31st, 2026. And I'm 100% sure that nothing happens by accident, so chances are this is exactly when this show should have been released. Truth be told, I'm actually kind of glad that this is the way I'm going to end the month of episodes. I think that a Fact or Fiction episode is always a nice thing to do. And at the end of the month, and this is literally the end of the month, just makes me feel a lot more optimistic about what's going to happen for the rest of the next month, because I personally feel that I would have been able to cap off a good month's worth of episodes with one of my favorites. Can't go wrong with it. Just can't. Now, I will say that this past Sunday, there was a lot wrong. It was a snowpocalypse. It's insane. I actually took the time here in Philadelphia at my house to take a tape measure and stick it all the way to the ground in a spot that was untouched by me and my kids when we were shoveling. And I got 11 inches on my tape measure from that snow. 11 inches. I don't know exactly what the news said that the totals were here in Philadelphia, but I know for certain at my house there was 11 inches minimum in one particular area. Trust me, 7 years ago, at what would have been the peak of my powers, going to the gym, doing the routines that I was doing then, getting ready to be a corrections officer, and in that world, I can promise you that amount of snow would have been nothing. Now, 47, some nasty things going on my neck between which vertebrae, C4 and C5, with a little arthritis in there, which has essentially given me some weird numbness in my left arm. Then, of course, the bicep repair, making it difficult for me to make a closed fist. In fact, it's so bad I can stick my pen in my hand with my fist completely shut. It's crazy. The other side, I can't even attempt, and it won't even do it, because I can actually make a tighter fist For this one, it just doesn't have that tight fist. Then we go to L4, L5 in my back, which typically is a pain sense. In fact, the reason why I retired, as they say. Normally, walking around, you know that scale that the doctors tell you, what's your pain between 1 and 10? I usually walk around at about 6. And of course, shoveling snow for 2 days changed 6 to about 9. Ugh, it was miserable, but it was what it was. Just had to deal with it, right? But what makes matters that much more fun is that I heard that there's a potential for more snow this weekend. I hope they're wrong by a long shot. But if they're right, at least I'll know who the Spear of the Week will be for the next episode. But speaking of cool segments, it's time to do fill in the blanks. And the question for the fill in the blank episode is, well, turns out that January 31st, 2026 will be the Royal Rumble. And the question that I have would be, who do I think is going to win the men and the women's Royal Rumble? First, I'd like to say that I'd like to see a surprise in the women's Royal Rumble, and that surprise win the Royal Rumble. I know that Naomi has been off after having a baby. It would be really cool if she was able to be in good standards and healthy and come back and win the Royal Rumble. And of course, in the male side, I like Obafemi. Big, strong guy. And not to say anything less of him, he was a shot putter. I appreciate that. Be pretty cool to see him win. So, the question one more time, who would I like to see the Royal Rumble? The blanks filled in by Naomi for the women and Obafemi for the men. Now, I'd also like to say that it's time for the main event. Fact or fiction? And this is Fact or Fiction number 20. It's a nice number. I know that there are some of you who have not listened to a Fact or Fiction episode before, and because of that, I'm going to tell you how it works. It's totally different than any of the other episodes. The other episodes, the bell rings for the main event, and I am here and I go through my notes and I tell you what I want to tell you, be it stories, be it whatever, and then that's the end. Now, for Fact or Fiction, it's much different. What ends up happening is I'm going to tell you some, either a statement or some stories, and I'm going to give you a chance to decide whether or not what I said was either fact or fiction. And at the end of the episode, not the end of the episode completely, but at the end of me telling you those stories, I will then reveal to you which ones were fact and which ones were fiction. Of course, I'll give you a little bit of time, but even if you don't want to use that time, there's always the pause button, right? Just pause it. And then you can take as much time as you want to decide whether or not a statement is fact or if it's fiction. Now that we've gotten the ground rules down, it's time to start. Let's see. Here it is. Many of my co-workers at the prison I worked at had the ability to memorize inmates' identification numbers, so they already knew what they were. Sometimes it was because they wrote the guys up that many times. Other times they just remembered it because they were people that they wanted to keep tabs on, just in case something went wrong. They just wanted to know their number. Me personally, once I got a cell phone and I could put information in it, and I had the opportunity and the ability um, to put phone numbers inside of it, I can promise you, I had nothing to do with memorizing any kind of numbers. Just not what I did anymore. It just not. And as a result of that, what I would do is I wouldn't do it. So when it came to inmate identification numbers, I didn't know anybody's number. Not a single inmate did I know their number, except one. One inmate happened to have an identification number that was impossible for me to forget. Now, this inmate's identification number was specific because it had because the identification numbers in general have 2 letters and 4 numbers in the state of Pennsylvania. This particular inmate, his number happened to be the first initial of me and my wife, and the birth date of one of my daughters. So immediately, I just literally took a look and I saw this dude's number, and everything about that instantaneously went into my head, and it was impossible to forget. It's the only one that I've ever memorized, and I did it on first glance. First time I ever saw his number, I instantaneously was like, okay, those are all numbers and letters that I can't possibly forget. It's impossible. Completely impossible. And I can promise you that he's the only number that I've ever known to memorize, and it's the only one I ever will. Do you think that I'm telling you the truth about an inmate's number that closely resembled my family? Or maybe I'm just locking the truth away from you? Let you know in a little bit. Next story. There was a car dealer that I bought one of the biggest pieces of junk that I ever owned in my entire life. This vehicle was so bad and it was such a nightmare that I decided to go and confront the owner of the dealership and give him an ultimatum. I'm going to do something about getting my money back from you because you've ripped me off. There is only one outcome that is going to be good for both of us. You get to keep the money that I paid, and I get a vehicle to drive. So, what we're going to do, I told him, is I'm not paying you another cent. When I came up here, I saw a vehicle that I liked. I will exchange the money that I've already paid you, and you get this hunk of junk back, and I take the keys to this other vehicle, and we never speak of it again. the money I paid already for this other vehicle. This guy was realizing that he was yelling and screaming, and I was actually very calm. And when he realized that I was not going to be intimidated in any way, and he wanted the situation over as much as I did, he agreed to it. And I left with a new vehicle. He took the hunk of junk back. We parted ways and never interacted again. Now, did I just drive you off into a side street? Or are we actually rolling along? And this is an absolute statement. I'll tell you at the end. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. The next one. While picking up the kids from school, I saw what was probably the most crazy and insane thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it certainly opened my eyes and made me think differently about school bus drivers. Now, admittedly, I had some crazy bus drivers when I was in school, but that was me, and I was okay with it. Now, fortunately, me or my wife will drop off or pick up the kids, so they no longer have to deal with school bus issues. They had gone on a school bus 2 years ago. I believe it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But 2 years ago, they had gotten the school bus. And I'm thinking it builds character because you get to wait for the bus in the hot and the cold, all those different things. It's good to have to wait for the bus. I think it makes for a good, entertaining situation. Now, what I saw this school bus do this day was off the charts, made no sense, and I'm glad that it didn't end badly, but it definitely could have. Because this school bus was moving down the road at a fairly good clip, trying to make the light. Apparently the bus was late to get to the school that it had to go to, which fortunately wasn't the school that my kids went to. It was heading the other direction. It goes through the lights of Roosevelt Boulevard here in Philadelphia. It's a main road, big time. If you're not familiar with it, it has 12 lanes of traffic, 6 in each direction. This bus flew through the intersections and was about to make a left on the inner side of Roosevelt Boulevard. This thing flew so fast it hit the inner median, flipped on its left side so that it was only on 2 tires. There was probably a it may have even been 3 feet of distance between the right side tires and the ground. It was off the ground. And somehow, in the midst of that turn, was able to rebalance itself and fall back on the other 2 tires. And the driver just continued on his merry way like nothing happened. Truly amazing. Nice little circus stunt that thing had. Now, my question for you is, did I really watch a school bus driver uh, perform a daredevil stunt? Or maybe you should turn a blind eye to this comment. What's next? Well, I saw a person waiting in line at ShopRite with me, and this person had the same playbook that I usually run when I go to a store at certain times. I fly through the aisles knowing exactly what I want to get, pick up exactly what I want to pick up, and I go right to the self checkout as long as I don't have any fruit. And then I'm out. This person did the same thing, and they were ahead of me. Now, when they got ahead of me, they realized that there was all 6 registers were occupied at the time. 2 registers were covered by, I can't really estimate it, but I would say the people who were in the line were in their 70s. There was 2 other registers that were covered by people who were in their mid 30s, and there was a person who was like my age, somewhere between middle 40s and 50s, and then there was a 20 something, real young kid. Now, the 40, 50-year-old guy was having some issues with the scanning, and the cashier who was working in the self checkout had to help this guy out a lot. The 2 older people in the 2 separate lines they were in, they were just moving really, really slow. Like I said, they were up there in years, and they were just moving really, really slow. The 30 somethings weren't moving slow, but they weren't moving fast. They were just sort of meticulous. One thing, scan it, place it down. Next thing, scan it, place it down. It was almost like they had a little bit of a rhythm, but they weren't going overboard. And then a 20 something person, the person you would think that might actually move the fastest, was the slowest. Apparently, she had never ever worked a register in her life. She was never in a position where she worked in a job where she was ever a cashier, and even if she was not allowed to use the register because it was clear as day that she had no idea what she was doing with a cash register at all. Now, the guy who was in front of me was starting to change a little bit. I'm thinking, what's going on here? I see him start to turn green. Because apparently he was pretty mad, but not as mad as I get when he turned to the red Hulk. He was turning into the green Hulk. Standard Hulk. And he got so upset that he just left his groceries where they were and walked out the door. Said, forget it. I am in such a hurry that I can't buy food. It's like, if I have kids at home, they're just going to be hungry. Oh well. I'm on a time limit, and my time is expired. I gotta go. And just walked right out. Left his groceries there and was done. Now, did I actually watch somebody just leave all their stuff behind and just continue on with the rest of their life? Or maybe does this story not check out? Next. I know I told you a few weeks, or maybe even no more than a couple of months ago, about Target with what they're doing with their employees. It's called the 10-4 rule. If a customer is within 10 feet of an employee, the Target associate is supposed to smile at them and wave to acknowledge the customer. Acknowledge me! Couldn't resist. If the customer is within 4 feet of them, they not only have to smile and acknowledge them, they have to speak to them and physically say, hello, how are you doing? Can I help you with something? if you're within 4 feet of the person. Now, of course, me personally, after knowing that rule and knowing that like I said, I like to go in and out and not be bothered by anybody. I have an exact agenda. The stuff that I want to get is the stuff that I want to get. Now, in the process of doing that, if I see something in transit that I might take 2 steps to look at, I'll look at it. And if it's something that is totally away from what I want to get, I just keep on going. So now that I know this about the employees at Target, I know that I want to stay a little bit farther away from them because they might get stuck doing that. Turns out that this particular guy that I saw was, of course, by the cereal box aisle, because it's pretty much where I hang out in all the stores, especially Target, because they have good boxes. Just to let you know. But this one lady was making a pretty big stink that this young guy who was there didn't acknowledge her when she was within 4 feet of him. More like she was pressing the matter. She was within what you could have considered 10 feet, but I don't believe that they have a tape measure out to around each employee, creating a 10-foot buffer zone so they know exactly that they're 10 feet away. But she insisted that she was at least that, and she didn't get acknowledged, and she moved in. So apparently she went into the 10-foot zone, and she was trying to get specifically into the 4-foot zone so that the employee would have to acknowledge her and speak to her. He didn't. I'm able to see this from my vantage point. At this point, the lady walks off in a huff, and I don't really care because, well, I'm busy looking for cereal boxes, specifically this one. And I have to find a good one, so it takes me a minute to go through all the boxes. Sometimes I have to clean off an entire shelf in order to get the one box that I feel is acceptable. So I'm there a minute. Turns out that she comes back and she has the manager with her. And the manager and this young guy are going at it, and it turns out that there was a lot of expletives being spewed between the manager, which was a mistake because he didn't take this kid off to the side and talk to him. He did it right in front of this lady. And the kid, the employee, they were going back and forth. And I'll be the first to tell you that as a manager, you definitely don't confront your employee in front of the customer. And even more so, a profanity-laced exchange in the middle of the store, that's totally unacceptable. Needless to say, the kid was like Popeye. I've had all I could stand and I can't stand no more. The only thing he didn't do was pop a can of spinach and punch the guy through the roof. Instead, he calmly took off his vest, threw it on the ground, and left. Kid just quit right then, right there. I honestly don't blame him. But my question to you is, should I quit telling stories like this? Or has my shift just begun and the truth is now being told? I'll let you know at the end. Here comes, I guess it was, let's see, the last one I got for you. 3 weeks or so before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. So we're talking the beginning of November. When, of course, the vast majority of people in my neighborhood, and probably many other neighborhoods, are putting up Christmas decorations. Don't get me wrong, I love Christmas, but I can promise you that when I got to a certain age, I personally discovered in my mind that, well, if you have to put the Christmas decorations up, you got to take them down. And it's never been anything that I wanted to do. I didn't want to be saddled with taking all the stuff down. So I haven't put up Christmas decorations in a long time because to me, it just was. It's a burden to put the stuff up because you got to take it down. It's kind of where I live. Now, this person who put these decorations up super, super early, I think realistically, decorations for Christmas shouldn't go up before Thanksgiving. I think maybe part of that whole um, Black Friday situation, that weekend after you spend all your money, maybe you should put the decorations up then. Because then you got like a month. That sounds reasonable. And then you take them down maybe by the 5th of January. That's all reasonable to me. But this particular house had the decorations up, and it had the coolest decoration I've ever seen for Christmas / Thanksgiving. It was an inflatable Santa Claus who was laying on his side, and sitting on top of him was an inflatable turkey. And there was a sign to the right of him, I believe it was. And the sign said, "Wait your turn, fat man." The turkey was tired of Santa Claus trying to steal Thanksgiving and taking extra time. So it did something about it. Do you think that I really witnessed Tom the Turkey take down Kris Kringle? Or did I just make all of that up? Well, I'm going to let you know in a few minutes. Right now, this is the time that if you want to pause and think about which ones were fact and which ones were fiction, this is your opportunity to do so. And so, for the next couple seconds or so, I'm going to shut up. I think by now, if you have paused so that you could think about it, you probably are already done and you're ready to find out what was what. What is fact? What is fiction? And here comes your answers. The first thing I asked you was, well, told you. An inmate in my prison that I worked in had an ID number that was impossible for me to forget. Like I said, once I got a phone and I started putting numbers in the phone, I just simply push one button and I call people. I barely remember my own number. However, I will say that this inmate had a great many a thing in common with my family. Now, I'm not going to say that it was my last name, or was it my uncle's, or was it my aunt's, but let's just say that this inmate absolutely had a number that was my wife's first initial, my first initial, and my Aurora's birthday. So I took one look at that and it was instantaneous memorization. Because dude had personal information of mine given to him by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it turns out that he was in prison for life. So he will always have that number. And like I said, what really made it crazy was the dude's name actually is a name that is in my family. So it's not just that he had my initials and my kid's birthday, but he also had the name of someone in my family, his last name. So it was a name that I'm very familiar with, initials that I'm very familiar with, and a birthday that I was very familiar with. So instantaneously, this inmate was somebody that I could never forget. Now, certainly he was, unfortunately, because he wasn't a problem. He was a decent guy. I don't know what he did, because that's one of the things that I always made sure I didn't never care what anybody did. Because if you start knowing what people did, sometimes it might bias the way you think. So we had the ability to look. I never did. Never looked anybody up. Don't know what anybody ever did. I was told what a few people did, but I never went out of my way to look to find what anybody did. But he was transferred probably 2 years into my career. But yes, absolute fact. There was an inmate who had his identification number were initials of my wife and myself and my kid's birthday. And his name was one that is in my family. So I couldn't forget it. That one is so true. Next, I told a car dealership owner that I wasn't going to pay him any more money, and he was going to give me a different vehicle in exchange for the piece of junk that he was selling me. Without telling too many details, because I can't remember whether or not I told it in a story or not. But this is true. This is a fact. And it's such a fact that I've decided to retell the story if I had already previously told it, but I can't remember if I did or not. I'm going to retell this story in story number 47. But it is in fact true that I bought a Bronco from a dealership, and it was a buy here, pay here, and it was a piece of junk. I'll elaborate more in story number 47. He had a Camaro in the lot when I came back to confront him about not paying him any more money. I saw the Camaro, and the plan formulated in my head. Now, granted, I was young at that time. I was only 22. Yeah, I was only 22 when this all came about. And I went to this 40, 50-year-old dude at the time who owned this dealership for years, who'd been giving people a problem. And I looked at him and I told him, I'm not paying any more money. You're going to give me the Camaro, and we're going to call it quits. It's going to be even. I'll never come back here for any other cars, and I'll never let anybody that I know come here. And that's that. He was very aggressive and yelling, and then, as I said, I was really calm when I told him that. It was under control. And sure enough, when he realized that I wasn't going to be intimidated by him in any way, he then agreed. Handed me the keys, we changed paperwork, done. That was a fact. But like I said, I'll elaborate more in story 47. I'm going to go deeper into that. While picking the kids up, I saw a school bus hit a curb and essentially angle itself on its left wheels off the ground, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 and 2.5 feet. The right tires were off the ground. I am telling you for sure, a second grader or a third grader could have walked underneath that bus tire when it was in the air. Yes, that is a fact. Bus driver poof, popped up on the side. Somehow, I don't know how, the vehicle stayed on those left driver's side tires just enough so that it was not going to tip all the way over. Fortunately for the driver, he had just enough momentum to keep the thing, because he popped up when he was in the middle of a turn, which I don't understand how he didn't just lose that whole bus then. But man, if he had even one more person on that bus, there would have been too much weight on the left side to keep that bus upright. But fortunately for him, it did not go that way, because boy, that bus was up on those driver's side tires, and I was waiting for a bad situation to happen. It was right in front of us. Right in front of me. It was us, no, the kids were with me. And I was like, yo. Goes back to my SEPTA trial days when I was doing that. One of the things that my instructor actually said, and I wasn't going to go along with it completely until I witnessed what I witnessed. He said that, well, some of the worst drivers you're going to find are going to be bus drivers for schools. And I was like, nah, it's no way. Well, at the very least, this guy, in the words of the late, great Gorilla Monsoon, he resembled that remark. Sadly, like I said, one more time, the school bus actually did drive on the left side, popped itself up when it was making a left turn. Should have flipped the bus, but somehow he didn't. That was definitely true. Fact all the way. Next one. Saw a person walk in the line and pretty much, like I said, run my playbook, run through the whole store, get what he needed to get. Got to the self-checkout, but there was so slow people in front of us that he decided to leave his groceries and take off. Now, admittedly, I am unashamed to say it. There have been times when I've gone to the self-checkout in places and I only had one item. And I looked at the situation, or as the kids say, I read the room and saw that things were going real slow. And I was only getting one thing, and it was one thing that I could have gotten from anywhere. And I just so happened to be in that spot to get it. And I left it. I've gotten drinks, sodas, whatever it is, and I just left it, and I just left. This is the only thing I came in there for. Truthfully, I've never seen anybody leave an entire cart worth of food at a supermarket waiting for the self-checkout. This one is 100% fiction. Made it up. Didn't happen. Not to say that it's not going to happen, because Lord knows, the person who might just leave their stuff waiting for the slow person in the register could very easily be me. No doubt. Next one. Saw an employee at Target have a heated profanity laden exchange with his manager because a lady was upset with the fact that he didn't acknowledge her as in accordance to what Target is calling the 10-4 rule. Well, I believe I made mention a while back that I was in a Target and I was around a bunch of employees who were getting close to each other within 4 feet and acknowledging each other, saying, "Hey, how are you? What's going on? Hi." And they were just joking around. And I laughed every second about it. Now, did I see anybody decide to be a Karen and go so far as to get management involved? No, I didn't. Will that happen sometime? Of course it will. As long as there's a rule like that in place, somebody's going to try to take advantage of it. It just didn't happen any time that I've seen so far. That one is fiction. Finally, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I saw Christmas decorations that were put up, and it was Santa Claus knocked over with a turkey standing over it, and a sign that said, "Wait your turn, fat man." Well, let's break this down before we tell you if it's fact or fiction or not. First things first, I've already made mention of the fact that I think that you should probably put decorations up sometime after Black Friday. Just seems to make sense. Give yourself a month to keep your decorations up, and then you take them down first week or so in January. That sounds like an acceptable amount of time. So I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 weeks is good, but then you start extending to the beginning of November. Literally, you're trick-or-treating people coming by and you're hanging up snowman lights. That's way too much. That's my personal opinion. Now, a week into November, and somebody has put up a decoration with Santa Claus knocked down by a turkey. Let's think about this now. We're going to break this down now, too. A turkey telling Santa Claus to wait his turn. If I'm a turkey and Thanksgiving is coming up, I'm thinking more like the Chick-fil-A cow. I'm going to be all about saying, well, have a gingerbread cookie. Drink some eggnog. Open some presents. We don't want to eat turkey. No, you don't want to eat that. No. Let Thanksgiving go by. Here, let me put your Christmas tree up for you if I'm a turkey. I'm not going to be so quick to want to have Santa Claus wait his turn. Oh, no. You can take this turn. I'll go somewhere else. You don't need to cook me and eat me if I'm a turkey. Of course, that's thinking logically about a crazy, ridiculous situation. But in truth, I did in fact witness that. Somebody on the Facebook group in my community took the picture, and I got a great laugh out of it. And then when I was driving around, it turns out that I noticed that it was a house that was really close to where I live. That is a fact. Somebody did in fact do that and put up that big old Santa Claus knocked over by the turkey and had the sign that said, "Wait your turn, fat man." But again, like I said, if I was the turkey, I would think more Chick-fil-A cow and be more willing to let Santa Claus have all the time he wants. That's just me. That's just me. Well, on that note, I'm going to ring the bell and end the main event. Now it is time for the Spear of the Week. And the Spear of the Week can only be, well, one thing. From my perspective, 11 inches of snow. Just would never seem like it was going to stop falling. I'm just, horrified by how much snow. And the fact that it could be happening, more snow coming. Don't know how much. Don't care to know. I just know that my poor broken down body can't do much more of that. I need at least a month before that nonsense comes back in order to get myself ready to go. Will I get a month? No. But it's wishful thinking. Spear of the Week. The snow that fell at the beginning of this week. Now we're going to go into those NFL picks. Seeing that I really prefer to do multiple shows and have them stored up so I can work on other things. I have notes for, like, I don't know, 3-4 shows, and then I can go ahead and I can do 3 or 4 shows, and then I can do some more notes over the time, and it gives me opportunities to watch people do stupid things that I can talk about in later episodes. Having these NFL picks that I do, or have done for the last, this is the second year, it makes it so that I have to do a show realistically every week, because in order to stay current. Now, the thought occurred to me that I might do another show because, well, if anything, this week is a bye week and I don't have to worry about anything, because next week would be the Super Bowl. So, in my mind, I'm strongly thinking about doubling up. But I'm probably not going to until after the Super Bowl. Because I do want to add a new, segment. One that's really pretty cool, I think, anyway. We'll find out what you think of the segment when the segment comes out, right? Right. But if this is the second to last week of my NFL picks, I'd like to say that I was pretty decent at this for the regular season. In both years, I was combined 110 and 82. That's a fairly decent 28 games over 500. It's not bad, solid. Now, this playoff run, like I said at the very beginning, I didn't even know if I wanted to do anything with the playoffs, because realistically the playoffs were, with the exception of my 49ers in that game against the Seahawks, these have probably been some of the best playoffs the NFL has had in years. They were incredible. There was overtime games, there was multiple games decided. As I'm looking at these scores now, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were like 6 games that I could see that were decided by less than a touchdown. 2 went to overtime. Many of these games were decided in the last 2 minutes. And I said it before, I'll say it again, I wouldn't want to put any money on any of these games at all. And up until last week, the championship week, I definitely proved my point with my record of 5 right and 5 wrong. I was right down the middle. And then this week changed everything because the championship week I was off terribly. I said that I was looking for the Seahawks to lose to the Rams, which did not happen. The Seahawks beat the Rams. I said 28-24, final score 31-27. Margin of victory, the exact same. I said 4 points, they gave me 4 points. Patriots and Broncos, I said Broncos, we're home. They're going to pull it off. They're going to win the thing. 20-14. Kind of wishful thinking. Didn't know it was going to be that terrible, the snow. And boy, Patriots pulled it off. 10-7. Crazy game. Crazy game. But now for the Super Bowl. Patriots and Seahawks. I'm looking at the Patriots throughout this entire time. They had one game that they scored over 20 points. One. And they were able to get multiple turnovers in those games. Actually, the Patriots, yeah, they had multiple turnovers in that game. And the problem was the Texans pretty much gave them multiple turnovers. And so, realistically, I'm not sold on the Patriots in any way. Their defense was solid enough to keep the Texans down to 16 points, the Chargers to 3, and it was the weather and the injury to Bo Nix which kept the Broncos down to 7. Whereas you look at Seattle, they had home field advantage all the way through. They annihilated the 49ers, who were decimated themselves, but they still did it. They put 41 points to 6. They bent the 49ers over their knee and they spanked them. There's no other words to put it. That's what they did. The Rams were a lot healthier. The Seahawks took them to task and they put 31 more points on the board. They were able to score points. Now, if you look at just based on me looking at the scores that the Patriots had against what I would consider a team that's the closest team to Seattle that they're going to play, would have been the Texans game. They were able to put on a fairly good defense. They got 28 points on. Now, if you look at the 28 points that they scored, and you look at the games that the Seahawks played, those 28 points would have only beaten. No, they would have beaten both teams. They'd have barely beat the Rams by 1. They'd have still took the 49ers down pretty good. But if they could only muster at the most against the Chargers 16 points, you got to kind of throw out the Broncos game because there was a lot of bad weather at the end, especially. But I just don't think that the Patriots can put up enough points to beat the Seahawks. And I hate to say it, but I don't like the Seahawks at all. I want the Patriots to win. And I can't even believe I'm saying that. I hate the Patriots a lot less than I hate the Seahawks. However, being practical about it, it only seems like it would make sense that this game in Santa Clara, which is going to have pretty solid weather, is going to be looking more like the Texans Patriots game in the other direction. I think that that game could very easily be something like Seattle 28, Patriots 14. They get doubled up. But I don't see them winning, and I think that as broken and disgusted as I will be, I think the Seattle Seahawks win the Super Bowl. Can't even believe those words coming out of my mouth. I hope to never say them again. But that's what I see. Seattle Seahawks winning the Super Bowl. Alright. Now it's time to shut down the show. Of course, you can always check me out at my Instagram page, Philip Henderson 5102. Join us on the Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. Quest for 100. Almost there. Let's get to 100 on the Facebook group. There's always room for one more. Of course, you're watching this. It's on YouTube at Phil the Lip, the channel. Subscribe to at Phil the Lip. More the merrier. Need to have more members, right? Go ahead, join, subscribe. But now, it's time for the words of wisdom. The only words of wisdom I can give you is, realistically, you gotta be careful when you're shoveling snow. Just that simple. Just be careful. Especially when you become an old guy like me, a handful of years away from 50. You need to be careful. Now, granted, I've been back in the gym doing the treadmill, lifting very light weights, but it's given me enough endurance where I can do this. As painful as it is when I'm done, I can do it. And, of course, as a result of that, I mean, my Tuesday and my Wednesday, which is today, well, yesterday technically, as I look at the clock, now Thursday, 12:04, I was pretty much a shut-in. I sat at home. I had to put my feet up, move slowly, just a lot of pain. The back, the hip, and the worst part is whenever I feel that little tightness in that right bicep, it really makes me a little uneasy. Things, good Dr. Davis's good work, don't want to mess it up. But I can tell you right now, I could certainly do without any more snow. But those are truly the words of wisdom. You gotta be careful. I already heard that there was, I believe it was 3 people who died shoveling snow because they were just a little too out of shape to do it, and they just kept going and going and going and going and going, and then boom, heart attack. It happens. Especially if you're not in any kind of shape. Be careful. If it comes more snow, just take your time. Like, I literally took 2 days, 3, to make sure that I got everything that I could get. Wasn't in any hurry, and took gigantic breaks in between. If I didn't, I would not have been able to do it. And of course, I also had help. Young little help. And a spoon. If you don't know what I mean, check out. Oh, I don't know. Did I put this on them? I didn't. So, you're literally watching me put this on the YouTube channel. Even as we speak. I thought I did. So since I didn't, I'm going to do it now. Right here, right now, as you see me doing this. Just uploaded the short right now. Did I already do it? Might have. But if I didn't, it's getting uploaded now. If I did, well, now it's on there twice. But, yeah. You watch that and you'll know what the spoon is all about. But as for now, I can certainly and will certainly tell you all that, well, my name is Phil, and you just listened to The Whip.